Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We are 70 games into this 2033 season, and with a 43-27 record, our Buffalo Wings are in first place in the National League East. We also have the best record in the National League and are trailing only the AL East's Toronto Blue Jays for the best record in baseball. So it has definitely been a successful season thus far for our Buffalo Wings. And at this point, we're taking a break for the first year player draft. And not surprisingly, although we previewed the draft at the end of the last episode, with the 34th pick in the draft, pretty much all of the players who were very interesting to us are, not surprisingly, off the market. Shortstop Luis Montalvo went first overall to the Chicago White Sox. Third baseman Mike Graves, who had been in a draft a few years ago and decided to go to Stony Brook, went number 2 overall to the Phillies. And center fielder Ed Rudiger went third to the Baltimore Orioles organization. A couple of other guys that we mentioned along the way. I personally was pretty surprised that center fielder Jake Dickens out of Nebraska Omaha lasted till the 20th pick for the Texas Rangers. He looks like he is pretty much ready to go as a major league player at this point. Will be interesting to see what the Rangers organization ultimately does with him when he is signed by them, presumably. And then right near our 34th pick, a couple of pitchers came off the board. Abel Schmidt, starting pitcher out of Michigan State. Doesn't look like an ace, but looks like he could certainly be someone who could help the back end of a rotation at a major league level and not too far. Juan Trujillo, a guy who with that profile probably would have been somewhat less interested in with the lack of control, but still certainly would have been in the mix for us at 34, went to the Red Sox. And then the last guy off the board before our pick, Prince Bacote from UC Davis, went 33rd overall. So we are now finally on the clock. And I'll take a look at the top prospects that I see. You can see there were a ton of 5-star and a bunch of 4.5-star players available at the top of the draft, and there are 2 5-star guys left. None of the 4.5-star hitters are even left at this point, so seems to be a pretty high correlation between the players that our scout thought were good this year and the players that other teams liked. There's really only one pitcher we would consider here at number 34, and that's the young starter Eric Barbarito, high school player committed to Toledo. Like the fact that he's durable, like the high work ethic, certainly has the stamina to start and is acceptable at holding runners. His fastball and his sinker aren't far off major league quality at this point. Still working on a curve as his third pitch. Probably going to be a 3-pitch guy because it doesn't look like we have much, if any, hope for that changeup to become a useful major league pitch. All in all, we think it can add up to plus stuff, plus movement, and plus control if he completely develops. And we definitely view him as the top pitcher available. There are a few batters for us to consider too. A couple of center fielders are the only 5-star potential guys according to our scout that are left. Jonathan Dockery, high school player out of Marist, New Jersey High School. Like the high work ethic, definitely could have a decent home run bat and good enough at contact, gap power, and avoiding strikeouts to be a pretty useful offensive player if he fully developed. Average-ish speed, looks like a corner outfielder. Among the 2 5-star guys, I prefer Chris Wilkins, center fielder out of Pleasanton, Texas. Also, his high work ethic, similar-ish defensively and in terms of his speed, but the batting profile in a full growth scenario is a little more attractive to me, even though Wilkins will not have quite the same home run power as Dockery if he fully develops. Also, take a look at the two four-star guys, Luis Cazares, a catcher. That defense bothers me. I would never want to play a guy like that at catcher. And when we look at his defensive profile, there's really no position on the field that you'd be comfortable playing him at. To me, that bat profile is just not special enough to be a full-time DH, especially given that we don't know much about his work ethic and his ability to completely develop. So I think it's very unlikely we'd go for Cazares. And Damani Etherly, center fielder, has a little bit more speed and a little bit more range than the other two center fielders we looked at. But for a player who's almost 22 years old coming out of Miami, his ceiling doesn't look incredibly high, and he's still got a lot of work to do. So among these four players, Wilkins certainly the one at this point that I'm most interested in. There are two other players who are somewhat lower rated who have also interested us. Sean Marchant, a third baseman, great personality, decent running. He can play a lot of positions, although he's not particularly adept at them, like the durability. And if he fully develops, the bat could be interesting. Not going to draw a lot of walks, which is a definite fear. And it's going to take perfect development to get the home run power and the voiding strikeouts up to a range where you'd be comfortable with him. He's also a bit older at 19 years old. I know some of you like the more experienced prospects, so although they're not on my list of real guys that I'm going to consider, I will look at Josh Para and Devin Buckley. Devin Buckley out of the University of North Georgia. First baseman, good work ethic, but the bat doesn't look potentially special to me. Josh Para, another center fielder, really like the speed, really like the durability. Never going to hit any home runs and could strike out a decent amount. Definitely appreciate Para more than some of the other prospects that I've looked at. But if we're going to go with a center fielder, I still like the pretty balanced profile of Chris Wilkins, acknowledging that in the majors he's more likely a corner outfielder or at 6'4", possibly could play him at first base. And the last guy that I'm interested in is another center fielder, Mike Thomas, also a college player, although he doesn't look quite as far along. But another guy with an excellent personality. Looks like he's got the range to potentially certainly play center field and be a real good left fielder. And you could also play him in right. Pretty good speed ratings, pretty good at bunting. Like the durability. And also the bat concerns me a little bit. If it fully develops, it's fine. But he is 21 years old, and his home run power and his avoid strikeout ratings are still both 30. If he gets full growth on both of those, definitely acceptable. The question is how much more he is going to develop at this point. At least he does have the good work ethic going for him. So as much as I'm intrigued by Thomas and Para and Marchant, I think if I'm going to go with a hitter, I'm going to go with Chris Wilkins, the center fielder. I like those balanced bats, and he certainly has potential to be special in terms of his eye and his gap power and enough speed to generate a fair amount of triples and home runs. He's not going to be a Deshaun Seifu as far as extra base hits, most likely, but with his line drive tendencies, definitely could hit a lot of balls into the gaps here in Buffalo if we were to sign him and develop him. But I don't love him enough to pass on the pitcher. We haven't been drafting a lot of pitchers, particularly at the top of our drafts in recent years. And Barbarito, I'm not going to claim is a great prospect, but if he fully develops, he's a pretty good major league pitcher. the durability, and we hope that the work ethic gives him a chance to develop. 18 years old, throwing in the low to mid 90s already. As I said, his fastball and his sinker aren't too far off. It's always a roll of the dice with a minor league player, but I am leaning towards Barbarito. Just to be fair, though, I will show that our scouting director does recommend Wilkins, the center fielder. I like him, there's no doubt. But I think a guy who, if he fully develops, looks like a really good 3-starter, possibly a number 2 starter, is a little more difficult to find than a corner outfielder with a good bat. There definitely could be someone with a similar profile to Wilkins. Quite honestly, there definitely could be someone that we've talked about among the everyday position players who's still left when we draft in the second round and is the top starting pitching prospect in my mind left in the draft. I don't think there is any chance at all that Eric Barbarito will be back in the second round. So we are going to overrule our scout and pick Barbarito here with our first pick in the 2023 draft. And moving on to our next pick, take a look at the batters who are available. And it does look like all of the guys that we've previously talked about are gone. So not surprising that 30 some odd picks later that those guys are not available and someone else liked all of them. So we're going to do a little work here on who to pick in the second round and let you know what we're thinking. And I've done my scouting now, and to me it's going to be a similar question to the first round. There's a couple of starting pitchers that intrigue me, and there's also an outfielder that intrigues me. But let's see if our scouting director recommends and matches up on any of those players. He recommends the shortstop Jake Wallace. For a second round pick, he's pretty uninspiring to me. The home run power looks like it could be great, but everything else, he's below average, potentially, except for his eye. Doesn't necessarily have a great work ethic, and he's not all that great defensively. So that's a direction that we're not going to go. I mentioned that there's 2 pitchers that I like. One is Max Vanderveen, 18-year-old starting prospect. Fastball already major league quality. Sinker and splitter aren't far off. The changeup develop, he's got a potentially really interesting 4-pitch arsenal, but obviously we don't expect that to happen with most guys. Do like his high work ethic, and looks like his stuff could be excellent, and his movement and control still both above average. Ground ball pitcher, throwing in the mid-90s. Not a horrible guy to roll the dice on in the second round. Another starter that we like is Greg Stone. Similarly, a guy who looks like he'll likely have a 3-pitch arsenal. Stuff only average, but pretty good movement and control. Also throwing in the mid-90s at 18 years old. Has the high work ethic we like, and also a durable pitcher. So Stone and Vanderveen to us are the 2 best pitchers available. Taking a look at the batters who are available, and the guy that we like the most is a center fielder, Steve Duncan, honestly similar to a lot of the center fielders we looked at in the previous round. He's really a corner outfielder when all is said and done. But the batting profile, if fully developed, could be interesting. The issue with him is that he's impossible to sign, so I think he's someone who could linger on the market for another couple of rounds. We are in a situation this year where we didn't spend much this past off season, so we've got a lot of money available, so we certainly have the opportunity to potentially go after a impossible to sign guy and get him picked up. But even though Duncan's our favorite batter, I feel like we got a shot potentially at getting him in a later round. So I think I'm going to go pitcher here in the first 2 rounds. Greg Stone Like the durability, worry a little bit about the quality of his stuff, but certainly the durability and the work ethic both work in his favor. Max Vanderveen, the 3-pitch arsenal, even if the changeup doesn't develop, looks like it's higher quality. Also has a high work ethic here, not quite the same stamina and not quite the same durability. But I think, at least according to our scout, at the high end of his development, I like Vanderveen a little bit better. So we are going to go ahead and draft Max Vanderveen right here. We'll go ahead and we will get our slot offers, which are what both players are looking for, out to them right now. And we will move on to the third round. And not surprisingly, Steve Duncan, the impossible to sign one, is still sitting around here in the third round. Looks like Eric Elliott, who's a lesser shortstop prospect, like his defense. The bat is questionable, but with a 65 range, 65 speed, the ability to bunt, if that bat develops to this level, he's not a superstar, but he's quite honestly not all that far off what we have in shortstop right now at the majors with Tim Hull if he fully develops. So certainly a guy to think about, but I don't think we're going to chase after either of those impossible to sign batters here in the third. Hope that one or two of them might fall towards the 5th or 6th round where we can hopefully get a little more value if we decide to go in those directions. And here in the third round, not surprisingly, since he's still available, our scout recommends the shortstop Jake Wallace, which is who he recommended last round, as you may remember. Duncan's still available. I think in terms of looking at, potentially 65 contact, 60 home run power, above average gap power, above average avoiding strikeouts, he's probably the best all-around hitter available. But I think we can probably wait another round or two, or possibly even 3, before having to make a draft pick on the impossible to sign player. And if we lose out on him, it's not the end of the world. He's not an overwhelming prospect in my mind. So we're actually going to still disregard what our scout has to say, and we're going to go down a little bit on the list to draft another shortstop, Jim Ford, 22-year-old college player out of the University of New Mexico. Like his durability, okay defensively. He's not a major league shortstop, but he could play multiple positions in the infield. He's fast. He's an excellent bunter. And I like that contact and gap power combination with his speed. Not a ton of home run power, not the greatest eye in the world potentially, and certainly as a guy who's 22 years old, wonder about the top end of Ford. I obviously like the potentially incredible home run power with Wallace and the ability to potentially draw walks. But the defense isn't quite as good as Ford. I don't love either of these guys, but we're going to go with Ford here in the third round. Moving on to the fourth. Duncan still available. Wallace still available. Scouting director has moved on from Wallace for some reason now. I guess he's sick of our rejection. To Brad Embler, starting pitching prospect who probably is not a starter without that changeup developing. Not a horrible guy to pick for the fourth round, but there was one pitcher who I've had my eye on, and he is still available. And that would be Stefan Wutsin. Just a very weird combination here. The changeup is likely not to develop, but he's also got a screwball and a fastball that are well above major league quality already. So his stuff is going to be off the charts. The pitches, though, are despite being a screwball, apparently just go right down the middle of the plate with no movement on them and are easy to hit out of the yard, and his control is also suspect. And with those extreme fly ball tendencies and that pathetic movement, I question just how many home runs he is going to give up. So I don't think I am going to go with him quite yet, since he's definitely a reliever. But he is somebody who we have our eyes on potentially for next round. Embler, similarly, he's a reliever. If he's available in the 5th round, we would consider him. But I think with Wallace being here now in the 4th round, that home run power and eye are intriguing. I don't know how great he's going to ultimately be defensively, but think he is decent value. And then I think my thought would be in the 5th round, if there is a Duncan still available, or an Embler or a Wootson, maybe it's time to go after one of those guys. I guess the higher rated relief pitchers, Jeremy Barr or a Steve Williams, if those guys are still around in the 5th round. Not horrible to be thinking about a reliever at that point either, from my perspective. But we're going to finally go with Wallace here in the 4th, moving on to the 5th, and Duncan is gone. So may have lost the chance to go after the impossible to sign player. So we'll have to put that money, unless we decide we want Dave Titus, who has a interesting profile. I mean, it's not that far off from Deshaun Seifu, except he doesn't have the same speed as Seifu, and he's going to walk almost never. So I don't know that we'd go crazy on wanting to bring him on board. The question now is, here in the 5th round, are any of those pitchers that we had talked about still available? And there are the couple of pure relievers, but the starter and the screwball pitcher are gone now. And the scouting director recommends that we go with Chris Schmader, a center fielder. At some point in a draft, I think you pick this guy. The 5th round, to me, seems a little aggressive. I think I am going to go with one of the relievers. Steve Williams, fastball and sinker, not far off major league level. Looks like he could be a reasonably well-balanced reliever. I'm a little more intrigued with Jeremy Barr, though. The lefty also has a fastball and a sinker that aren't far off major league level. He's durable. He's got a high work ethic, great at holding runners on, throws a little harder. So I think his stuff could definitely be better. And lefty reliever, to me, is a reasonable way to go here in the 5th round. So we're going to go ahead and draft Barr. And if we do anything interesting in these last 15 rounds of the draft, I'll let you know. And it ended up being a rather uneventful draft. Really, it's all going to be about whether Barbarito or Van der Veen, the starting pitchers, whether either of them develops. And then maybe between Ford and Wallace, we get a infielder out of this when all is said and done. We did go for 2 guys, Frank Carranza and Andy Hutton, in the 7th and 8th rounds, who are looking for above slot. Don't necessarily think either of them is going to develop into a big-time player, but Carranza, a corner outfielder who's durable, who could have above-average contact and home run power, and then Hutton, a third baseman, like the work ethic, potentially a pretty decent contact hitter. Don't think either of those guys is going to develop into too much, but they're all lottery tickets by the time you start getting into the middle rounds. But the positive thing is, we do, with all the money we have this year, have the ability to offer those 2 guys what they're looking for, well over slot, and at least pay for those lottery tickets, since we didn't have the opportunity, or I guess we did have the opportunity to sign, or draft more accurately, an impossible to sign player, but we didn't didn't end up pulling the trigger on any of those guys until it was too late. And our Wings actually struggled a bit on the field last week. We had a 3-game series against the mighty Los Angeles Angels and got swept by them. But Seifu did his part, was named as the National League Player of the Week. 520 for the week with 7 ribbies and 4 runs scored. Once again, should be in the mix to lead the league in steals by the time the year is done, and hitting over 300 for the second time in his career, potentially, if he keeps this up. And some interesting news here. Shohei Ohtani making great progress recovering from that torn labrum. Going to be back to 100% about 4 to 5 weeks ahead of schedule. As we've talked about in previous episodes, although we lost our other two-way player this year, Juan Estrada, to a torn PCL, and he is definitely gone for the year, I'm not convinced that Ohtani is going to still be a major league pitcher when we scout him after this injury, but I do think potentially that left-handed bat with still some power and ability to draw walks against right-handed pitching could be a little boost for our lineup towards the end of the season. So no guarantees that he's going to be going back into the rotation. Certainly not even any guarantees that he's going to be on the major league roster. But we'll at least get a chance to get him on a rehab assignment, hopefully sometime in early August, and then at the very least have a decision to make on him as a September call-up, if not possibly sometime before that. And we've made it to the start of July, 80 games into the season, 47-33 record, still the second best in baseball behind only the Blue Jays. Lead has been narrowed to a game and a half over the Pirates, 2 on the Nationals. Pirates have won 3 in a row at this point. Taking a look at the league leaders, Seifu with 25 steals is now closing in on Leighton Gravel and Jay Allen II to potentially lead the NL for a 6th straight year. And he's the only guy on our team who's on any of the top 3 leaderboards in the National League. So we've been having this good season through a pretty balanced approach. The 47-33 record is right in line with expectations. You can see we've won at least 15 games every month of the year, had a record 4 or 5 games over 500 every month of the year, so pretty consistent production. Ranked 2nd National League in runs scored. Still don't hit a ton of home runs, but we are 1st in the National League with 89 steals, stealing more than a base a game, and our batting average is up to 4th in the National League at 267. We hit just 245 last year, so that 20-plus point increase in batting average definitely helping our success in terms of our overall offensive numbers. We've slipped to 5th in runs allowed, starters still 4th, but the bullpen has slipped back more towards middle of the pack. Defensive efficiency, we're one of the better teams, and our zone rating, we're middle of the pack there as well. So we're going to have to start turning our attention, particularly when we get through the All-Star break, as to who to potentially add to improve this roster and ensure that we can get back to the playoffs for a 6th straight year and hopefully win a 2nd consecutive NL East when all is said and done here in 2033. And our Buffalo Wings have had a great start to the month of July. Bobby Bolig just won the National League Player of the Week, 11 for 23, 4 homers and 12 ribbies. On the year, he's hitting .291, 14 homers, 57 ribbies. So he has definitely been a nice addition to the team, kind of doing exactly what we expected, playing mostly against right-handed pitching. As I mentioned, the team has been playing really well here in the month of July. You can see we've lost just 1 game to the Phillies, but we swept the Expos, took 2 out of 3 against the Phillies, and then we just swept the Mets. So a good job against teams that are in our National League East Division. And you can see we've opened up a 5-game lead now on the Nationals. and we are tied with the Blue Jays now for the best record in baseball as we head into the All-Star break. And with that, let's find out for this team tied for the best record in baseball how many All-Stars we are going to have this year. Chris Sabatka, our ace pitcher, not surprising to see him as an all-star with a 10-1 record, 3.03 ERA, almost a strikeout per inning, 135 ERA plus, 77 FIP minus, and a 3 WAR through just past the midway point of the season, almost topping what he did a year ago for us when he tied for the National League lead in wins. So nice to see Sabatka on board, being named an all-star for the first time in his relatively young career. Cam Collier at third base, named an all-star for us. First all-star award for Mr. Collier, hitting .283, 12 doubles, 10 homers, 816 OPS, 123 WRC plus, 2.1 WAR on the season for Mr. Collier. And don't know if there are any other players that I may have missed. Mike Heiner, the rookie. Like to see that. We were talking about how he was just named Player of the Week. And Heiner, who we drafted just over a year ago, 32nd overall. We signed him to a long extension before he had ever played a major league game based on what he had done for us in the minors last year. And he is having a pretty productive offensive season for a rookie. 285 average, 19 doubles, 17 home runs, 137 WRC plus, and a 2.5 WAR on the season. We signed him to that 10-year, $66 million deal, which is going to pay him much more than the minimum that he would have been making for the next several seasons. But we buy out his arbitration years and a few of his free agent years, give him lifetime financial security. And early returns on this are that it's working in our favor if he's able to continue this type of production with WRC pluses in the 130 plus area. Will end up being a great contract for our Buffalo Wings to get him signed. So 3 All-Stars for Buffalo in this 2033 season. And with that 5-game lead in the NL East, probably time to check in here on July 11th as we get into the All-Star break as to how everyone on the team is doing this season and where we may want to look for some help over the next 20 days before we get to the trade deadline. Right in line with expectations as far as our overall record versus our Pythagorean. Mentioned we've had a great July so far. Still second in the National League in runs scored, and with this winning streak, we've improved to third in the National League in runs allowed. Also got a good defense, so it doesn't seem like there are any glaring flaws with this team that we need to fix. That said, we've now gotten all of our draft picks signed, and we've still got over $17 million to potentially bring some talent on. So we will certainly be perusing the trade market to see if there's any way that we can add some talent to this team in an area of need and hopefully help us get past the NLCS, which we have made 3 times in 5 playoff appearances and 7 years overall as general manager of the Buffalo Wings. But we're 0-3 in the NLCS, still yet to make it to a World Series. And with the way we're playing thus far in 2033, the World Series is certainly our goal. So taking a look at our pitching staff, we mentioned Sabatka was named an all-star. Jarlin Susana, 7-3 with a 3.66 ERA, striking out more than a batter per inning. Sincere Shazier, the rookie top prospect in our system, 3-1 with a 2.68 ERA, striking out more than a batter per inning. Still hasn't developed anymore as far as his control, his fastball, or his sinker. But certainly the early returns from him are that his meteoric rise up the prospect rankings to number 23 in baseball seem to be justified. Andrew Painter has been solid for us. Not quite as good as he was a year ago when we were using him out of the pen, but still a respectable major league starter for us thus far. And then Hayden Yinger, 8-4 with a 3.43 ERA, is our number 5 starter. So the pitching staff has done well. Could we try to bring on another big-time starter and move Painter to the bullpen? I think that's possible. Bryce Miller as closer is not intimidating, but 24 saves this year, 3.68 ERA, pretty much having a typical Bryce Miller season, is a solid but not spectacular closer for us. Jorge Carrillo is our stopper, is a guy who flopped as a starter a year ago. We took him out as a starter after those 10 games, but his returns as a reliever were solid. And he's only 3-7 this year with 4 saves and 11 holds. So he's been involved in a lot of decisions for a reliever. 3.89 ERA is okay, striking out more than a batter per inning. Issue is that he's been giving up too many dingers, 12 and 76 1/3 innings. But his SIERA is lower than his actual ERA. His ERA plus is positive, but when all is said and done, he's still been below a replacement level player. So perhaps moving him out of the stopper role may make some sense. Franklin Heel, 6-0 with a 3.55 ERA. His numbers don't look all that different from Carrillo's. Sean Sullivan, the veteran, the left-handed reliever, 3-4 with 12 holds, 4.15 ERA. He's been a below-average pitcher this year and slightly below replacement level. Kyle Backus, another left-hander in middle relief, having another solid, respectable year for us out of the bullpen. David Aranya, former Rule 5 pick, has pitched 32 innings, striking out more than a batter per inning for us. Jaden Hilaire, this past year's Rule 5 pick, has been pretty solid. 2.22 ERA over 28 1/3 innings pitched, but his FIP minus indicates he's been a bit below average, and his WAR is right at replacement level. And then Johanne Varejo, the rookie, 2-0 record with a save for us, 3.25 ERA with more than a strikeout per inning, but his FIP minus is also below average, although his SIERA is strong. So honestly, in our bullpen, although the aggregate numbers are respectable, we've got a lot of guys who are closest to replacement-ish level. And I think that potentially, if there's a big-time starting pitcher to have, bringing a big-time starter on board and moving Painter into the bullpen could help. Assuming that may be difficult to do, could obviously look for a little bit of help in the bullpen, particularly another left-handed pitcher. I don't think there's anyone who is a sacred cow who we would not be willing to sacrifice in the bullpen. Miller probably not going to lose a role. Carrillo still has option years left. I don't know that we'd send him down, but probably best case scenario, we move him into more of a setup or middle relief role and maybe either have Painter as our stopper or a big-time reliever that we happen to pick up as our stopper. So let's take a quick look at any pitchers who happen to be on the trading block right now. And there is a big-time reliever in Cade Smith, a guy who's been on our team briefly in the past. He could certainly help the bullpen. Searching for starters who happen to be on the trade block. Nobody overwhelming. Jackson Jobe, certainly, he's got a profile of a decent starter. Don't love that he's fragile. He's making a lot of money, but He's tied for the league lead in wins each of the last 2 years, tied with guys on our teams, actually, each of those last 2 years. Still putting up pretty similar numbers this year in terms of his ERA, his Sierra even better, his FIP minus is the best it's been the last 3 years. Hasn't had much success with his one-loss record with the Mets, who have been struggling, but could potentially look to bring a guy like Job on board if we wanted to move Painter into the bullpen. But at the top end of the pitchers on the trade block, obviously Cade Smith there, and you look at some of these other profiles, and at a 30,000-foot view, it seems like there probably is some talent out there that could help our bullpen. Raul Alcantara is the lefty who's been out there for a while. We've been looking at him from afar. Another lefty, Joey Cantillo. I think either of those guys could certainly help us. I don't know that either is going to be a different maker as a left-handed arm out of our pen, but we don't necessarily even need a difference maker. We basically just need a left-handed arm. Jose Ferrer, I've been reticent to bring him on board just because I think that personality could be a little disruptive in the locker room potentially, but he's certainly an established left-handed pitcher, although it looks like he's in Double-A in the Philadelphia organization at this point. But I would think a big-time starter and or relief help to me are the obvious paths to consider when we think about improving this team over the next 3 weeks. And if that relief help happens to be a left-handed pitcher, all the better. So we'll turn now to our everyday players. And the good thing that I really like is that we've got 7 guys who have WARs of 1.4 or higher. We don't have anyone having an MVP caliber season, but we've got 4 guys on pace to probably have WARs between 4 and 5 over the course of the year, which is pretty solid. Left by Heiner, who we've already talked about, his 2.5 WAR as a rookie is the biggest number on our team. In addition to the good double and home run numbers that we talked about with him, he's also 13 for 16 on the base paths as we lead the league in stolen bases. So Heiner's been productive. Adley Rutschman, who's historically gotten off to some relatively slow starts for us. His defensive abilities are not what they used to be, but at 35 years old, we are in the 5th year of that 7-year contract, and although he has not been incredible for us, he certainly hasn't had any really bad seasons, and this year is no exception. Hitting .267, 14 doubles, 6 homers, 121 WRC plus on the year, and a 2.4 WAR. He's consistently been one of the top catchers in baseball. Not an all-star this year. As we mentioned, we got 3 all-stars, and Rutschman is not one of them. Has been an all-star 3 of his 5 years with us, and as we mentioned in the past, he's consistently been a 4+ WAR player for us, and he looks like he's going to be on his pace to do that this year. Does have some knee tendonitis acting up right now, which influences his running. Hopefully a few days off around the All-Star break will help with that. But pretty satisfied with what he's doing. Don't see any need to make changes there. Deshaun Seifu, another solid offensive year, hitting .313, 29 doubles, 4 triples, 30 of 36 on the base paths. That 123 WRC plus is, I believe, one of the best, if not the best, numbers of his career. He was a 124 down in 2029 when he had that monster year with 21 triples and 99 stolen bases, led the league in runs and hits, and he's not far off the offensive pace he put up that year. His WAR is 2.3. He has definitely regressed a little bit defensively over the years as he's gotten older, but still a pretty productive offensive player. Cam Collier, as we mentioned, all-star for us along with Heiner, 283 average, 12 doubles, 10 dingers, 6 of 7 on the base paths, having a nice year as our third baseman. Bobby Bolig, the first baseman that we brought on with that trade that so many of you gave us input on, hitting 291, 18 homers, 18 doubles, 14 homers, 57 driven in, 14 out of 20 on the base path. So not quite as efficient as some of the other guys on our team who have a little bit of speed, but his 134 WRC plus right in line with what he did a year ago in Pittsburgh. His WAR down a bit. Issue with him is his batting splits. We're only starting him against right-handed pitching, and against right-handed pitching, he's hitting 309 with a 148 WRC plus. Obviously, most of his power coming against right-handed pitching. Against lefties, he's been brutal as expected, a $152 average. Fortunately, we've been able to limit that to just 33 at-bats on the season. So never had any doubt that he would be able to hit against right-handed pitching. Our goal is just to limit the number of at-bats he has against left-handed pitching. Tim Hull, the young shortstop, having another solid season. 259 average, 19 doubles, 7 homers, slightly above average offensive player with a 1.7 WAR on the year. Would love it if he was a little bit better defensively, but he's been handling shortstop fine for us ever since he came up to the majors. And Vance Honeycutt, the veteran left fielder, struggling this year with the 229 batting average, but still does have some power with 13 homers, and he's 21 out of 24 on the base path. So that's all added up to an average-ish offensive performance, still above average, above replacement level overall with a 1.4 WAR. He could be, as we've talked about, in his final season with us. Last I checked in on him, he was still looking for over $22 million a year as a free agent. Numbers come down a bit with his weaker performance, but 9 years is a little scary for a 30-year-old who's fragile physically. The $16.5 million figure is somewhat less intimidating if he was able to do a shorter contract with some options with a mid-teens dollar amount. Maybe there's a chance he would be back with us next year. Gavin Grayovac has been a utility outfielder, really a utility player all over the field for us this year. Picked him up in a trade with Milwaukee at the beginning of the offseason with the intent of using him in that type of role, likely starting him against left-handed pitching, and then kind of a utility guy other than that. 288 average with 7 homers and 191 at-bats, 116 WRC plus, 0.8 WAR. Pretty solid for a guy who's not playing every day. Jordan Westberg is in kind of a similar role with us. We signed him as a free agent. Not performing as well in terms of the batting average, hitting just a $195, but he does still have 11 doubles, 8 homers, and 31 ribbies in 174 at-bats. So the hits that he has gotten have been relatively impactful. That said, he's still been a below-average offensive player, but he is a guy who is pretty versatile defensively and in a utility role for us. John Featherston, center fielder, having an off year offensively, hitting just 240 with 4 homers, not doing much on the base paths, well below offensively, barely above replacement level, even when you include the good defense. He could be getting pressed to be a guy who may not be on our team next year. We do have some young center fielders who are not far away. Unfortunately for us, Tyreek Hardage, who is the most obvious guy to replace him, has been out with a herniated disc for over a month now and still has over a month that he is going to be on the IL before hopefully he can come back and play at the end of the year in Albany. Was hitting 251 with 9 homers and 215 at-bats before he got hurt about a month ago. But certainly looking at his speed, his defensive profile, and his potential offensive profile, there is definitely a risk for Mr. Featherston, whose arbitration number is going to be about $6.5 million next year, that we may decide to move on to Mr. Hardage this upcoming off season. Ivan Herrera has been our backup catcher, put up a 0.4 WAR, hitting just a buck 80, but he does have 4 homers and 89 at bats for us. Maybe getting a little more playing time the next couple weeks with Rutschman banged up a little bit. Henry Allen, Rule 5 pick from over a year ago at this point, hitting just 235, but he does have 4 homers and 68 at bats. A little bit above average offensively. He's a guy who we could certainly look to replace. And then Willy Adames, the only guy with a negative WAR on our team, hitting just a buck 25, just 24 at bats. The only reason he's on the team at this point is that he happens to be our only captain personality, and we do want to kind of have a strong presence in the clubhouse. So when we think about this team, the offense has been pretty good. How could we improve it? You know, guys like Allen and Adames, we could certainly upgrade our utility infielders. And if we could find someone with a pretty big bat and a captain personality who's available, that would let us hopefully get a more productive player than Adames into that 26th spot on the 26-man roster. Other than that, pretty comfortable with the infield of Bolig, Seifu, Collier, and Hull. And the outfield has been hitting pretty well also. If we could find a really big bat in center field, that wouldn't be the end of the world for this year if there's someone who has a contract coming to an end. So I'd say a utility guy or a center fielder with a big bat who happens to also have a captain personality would be some paths for us to potentially look at here on the trade market. And obviously we don't have to be reliant on guys who are on the trade block, but taking a look at the players who are available right now, far and away the best player available is Shamar Badio. He's a disruptive influence in the clubhouse, though. Wow, you can tell he's a guy who's first-round pick in 2029, making the major league minimum, and he's still on the trade block. He hasn't hit that well this year, but 41 and 37 home runs the 2 previous seasons in Milwaukee. He's got that great home run power. Clearly a bat that could help pretty much any team, but it looks like Milwaukee is beginning to sour on him. Have to figure out whether you can fit that personality into the clubhouse. Besides him, it doesn't look like there's a ton of true impact bats available. Tyler Soderstrom got a little pop in his bat. He's already hit 22 homers this year and 323 at-bats. Carlos Correa is a captain personality who's out there. Wrecked physically. He's probably a little better offensively than Adames right now, and certainly is better defensively, even at closing in on 39 years old. You know, if the price for Correa was cheap enough, could we bring him on board as a potential replacement for Willy Adames? I think that could be something that would be in the mix. Take a look at what Adames's profile looks like, and there's not a huge difference. Correa a little better contact-wise. They're both going to strike out a ton. Correa is certainly better defensively at this point, and Adames hasn't been great. So if the price for Correa was dirt cheap, swapping out Correa for Adames would upgrade, particularly defensively, our utility infield a bit, but not a big impact decision, unfortunately. I think, clearly the most interesting thing to think about would be Shamar Badio. Don't love that disruptive personality. Kind of depends how much Milwaukee is looking for him. Yeah, and the only guy they'd take straight up for him is Sincere Shazier. Certainly not a trade that we would make. So although they want to get rid of him, it's not a fire sale type situation. So we may have to be a little more creative over the coming days and maybe try to pick up someone who is not on the trade block. Gavin Lux, another captain personality. Don't know how much of an upgrade he is over Adames at this point. Feels with the fact that he is not as good defensively as Correa and doesn't have the same type of home run power as Correa, that Lux is more just making a deal to make a deal and bring on a captain personality. Kobe Mayo, similar story. So there are certainly some captain personalities available. Israel Pineda. Don't see where that gets us much. I don't know that he's quite as good as Ivan Herrera. So we may need to get creative with what we do in the coming weeks as we get closer to the trade deadline. As I said, a frontline starting pitcher and or help for the bullpen is what we're thinking about on the pitching side, particularly, as I've mentioned, if there's a left-handed arm we can throw in there. And as far as the batting side, a better captain personality, or I guess more accurately, a captain personality who at this point is a better major league player than Willy Adames is something for us to think about. And if there's a big bat that could maybe play in center field or a super utility type of role, that would be something to consider adding as well. So no obvious needs for a team that is 55-34 at the All-Star break, but we certainly want to do everything we can to hopefully have this season end with a trip to the World Series. So we'll be thinking heavily about how to get there in our next episode when we play up through the trade deadline. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.